Hi everyone, it's Michaela. I'm Michaela, the owner of Michaela Made, a small business that does digital art prints and stickers. Welcome to my first studio vlog where I talk about Stationery Fest in New York City. Please be sure to follow along and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Now let's get into the video. So the first day of the trip was on a Tuesday and we flew out of Southwest. Our flight was delayed by 2 hours. Everyone in Group A had been loaded onto the plane and then unloaded. I ended up editing some videos to pass the time. We got into LaGuardia around 2 a.m. It was really big, but we were exhausted and quickly grabbed an Uber to head to my friend's apartment in Manhattan. Day 1 of Stationery Fest, we started the day off with some really good bagels. Miguel got a savory bagel and I got a sweet bagel, which is strawberry, and it was really good. We caught the subway. That was a 45-minute train ride out to Greenpoint in Brooklyn. It was really great being back in New York. I really love using public transportation and people watching on the train. Greenpoint was really charming, but it was already a little overcast and rain was forecasted on our way over there.
We're liking Greenpoint a lot. It's much quieter, more green, less smelly for sure.
What's point?
You're pointy? Wow. Anyways, on our way to Stationery Fest.
The festival started at 11, but since we slept in and took it easy because we had gotten in so late the night before, we were shocked to find that the line had already spanned a block. By about 1 p.m., we had waited about 2 hours. It also started raining around the time we got across the block. Yoseka employees did a pretty good job of checking in people in line in case they had workshops so they wouldn't miss their workshop. Despite the rain, people were in good spirits and excited to see all the stationery. The ones at the front of the line had gotten there at 8 a.m., even though the festival started at 11. By the time we made our final turn, there was a guy who was checking in wristbands for 1-day or 3-day passes, and the Yoseka Stein was in sight. They had a little miscommunication with the queuing system. This was a bit frustrating for people who had already waited in line for 3 hours because they were being told to get on a queuing system before they would be let in. I reluctantly got on the queue, but I stayed by the door and got lucky to be let in. The main exhibit hall was very impressive. There were so many art vendors and stationery vendors, including pencil vendors and pen vendors from around the world. Some of my favorite illustrators and artists were also there, so I was very excited to visit their booth and wait in line. The building had quickly hit capacity, but I felt like I could still maneuver around. During the festival, Yoseka also had a stamp rally that I didn't end up participating in, but they had a really cool 3-color stamp that I did take advantage of. After shopping the exhibitor hall, I hopped over to Yoseka Stationery next door. I then wandered down to some of the other shops down the street and got a late lunch from Polly's Slice Shop. Kettle Tea was also down the street and offered a beautiful range of ceremonial matcha and teas. We got some soft serve for dessert. We had dinner plans and headed back to Manhattan, where we met up with our friends at Chelsea Market. We got some food at Very Fresh Noodle, which was one of our favorites because it's hand-pulled noodle and very spicy. Overall, a great end to the day 1, and we got to enjoy the city in the company of good friends. Day 2 was our stationery store tour day, and we had plans to visit MoMA. Our first stop was Best Bagel and Coffee. I was surprised that I actually ended up liking Brooklyn Bagel better, but we found a nice park to eat. We got a little sprinkled on from rain that would continue throughout the day. We decided to take shelter from the rain and do a little shopping. Miguel was in dire need of new shoes, and so we headed over to Famous Footwear to find him some new kicks. After that, we headed over to the MoMA and got there right at opening. There was a long line that wrapped around the building, but it moved pretty quickly, even though we were getting sprinkled on. Having been to New York a couple times, the MoMA had been on my list to finally visit. They had some incredible installations and exhibits to enjoy and walk around. We spent hours just enjoying the art. After the MoMA, we wandered towards Times Square and got some cheesecake for later from Junior's. We were starting to get a little hungry and had not thought to eat at Junior's, but stumbled across Ichiran Ramen, a traditional Tokyo-style ramen house where we were delighted to find they had individual cubbies that you can order your food at. The unique thing about it, you order your ramen via ticket and the restaurant offers a little privacy door that you can collapse next to yourself. We were excited to be seated pretty quickly, but then the ramen took about 30 minutes to finally make it to our table. We were pretty hungry and grumpy by that point, but the ramen ended up being worth it. After lunch, we continued on, stopping by the Nintendo store near Rockefeller Center. They had a really cool vintage Nintendo display, but I was surprised to see that they didn't have a very large merch section for most of their games, including games like Animal Crossing and Legend of Zelda that I personally enjoyed playing. We continued on and began our trek to our stationery store tour. We cut through Washington Square Park, and it was a bit of a change being really rainy that day, but still had its charm. Our first stop was Greenwich Letterpress. It was a little bit smaller than I expected, but had a lot of charm. The next stop was the Strand Bookstore. Even though I know they had some pretty good totes, I was a little disappointed with the selection. Unpopular opinion, but I found I did like the selection better at Powell's in Portland, Oregon better. Next up was Milk Bar, just to check it out after seeing this table. It was interesting and salty, but just okay. It drizzled throughout the day, but we headed over to the next stationery store that I was excited to check out, which was Nico Izakaya. The space was small, but it had a wonderful little selection of stationery, and I had a lovely chat with one of the shop girls who was working there, named Moby. Next, we swung by and got some gorgeous pastry from a place called Lady Wong's, and headed to our last couple stops, which included Top Drawer and Goods for the Study. There, a lady I had met at Stationery Fest had recommended this Italian restaurant down the street, and it was absolutely delicious. We had some wonderful calamari seafood as an appetizer and some amazing noodles for dinner. The hostess was really nice and was able to seat us without a reservation, and it was delightfully cozy being able to sit inside and watch the rain while we ate. Back at my friend's apartment, we enjoyed all of the desserts that we collected throughout the day. Heading into day 3, we started off with some bagels and then got on the bus to head over to Kinokuniya, which we weren't able to hit the day before. We got there right at opening, so we got the store to ourselves. Manga and figurines were up on the top floor, and then the stationery section was located in the basement. They had a wonderful selection of Ghibli merchandise and ephemera for Ghibli fans, along with a beautiful selection of pins, notebooks, and bags for any stationery lover. I was able to grab a couple goodies that I talk more about in my art haul, linked in the description below. After Kinokuniya, we headed over to the MET, because the last time we had gone, we only had seen a fraction of the museum and wanted to see the Heavenly Bodies exhibition. We hopped on the subway and then cut through Central Park to head to the museum. It was incredibly humid and hot, but the views were really pretty. Once we arrived at the Met, we were surprised to find that we had to sign up for a queue in order to enter the Heavenly Bodies exhibition. The wait ended up lasting 3 hours. I sadly had a workshop that I had to attend at 3 p.m., so by 2 p.m. we had to leave the museum and get on a 45-minute train ride to Brooklyn. Ultimately, we weren't able to get into the exhibition on time, but we had spent that time enjoying the exhibits and all of the art that the Met had to offer. It honestly made me feel like I was in a Ferris Bueller scene, and we still enjoyed our time in the museum. We made it back to Brooklyn, and I made it back to my workshop just in time. It was absolutely worth the rush to get back, because it was such a fun experience. The workshop was hosted by Lucky Risograph, an AAPI-owned risograph studio based in Dumbo, Brooklyn. I was pretty familiar with the process of risograph, but being a digital artist, I had never done it manually by hand. I spent the first part of the workshop drawing my 2 layers on paper. Since I'm planning a trip to Japan, I was inspired by ginkgo leaves of the changing season going into fall, and wanting to create more cat artwork, I also included cats in the drawing. The first layer was the thinner paper layer, and the bottom layer was the cardstock layer. We did the thinner paper layer first because it was a lighter color. The first couple prints came out a little uneven because the drum was still getting inked up. They reassured me that it would even out after a couple passes. We then double-checked the alignment and ran the second color, the blue. It came out really cute, and I was very pleased with the results, and I loved how some of the ink layers layered on top of each other. Once we were happy with the 2 layers, they gave me a choice of a cream paper to print my final cover prints on. I got a few extra sheets to keep as art prints as well. The next step was to assemble my planner. My cover was hole punched, and then I had a selection of planner layouts and notebook layouts that I could choose from. I selected a year of planner layouts and a couple notebook pages in the back. They also offered fountain pen friendly paper. I took my time to decide on a spiral cover, but I finally settled on a mint color because I felt like it went really well with the colors they were using. Overall, it was a really fun experience and a really chill, creative outlet to be able to explore some bookmaking and getting to take something home that was mine. The workshop space was located right above the exhibitor hall, and it had a really cool view of the Brooklyn area. After my workshop, I had a little bit of time to kill, so I went downstairs to the exhibitor hall and grabbed a glass of hojicha from Kettle Tea. I did a little bit of last-minute shopping and then met Miguel, who had picked up a late lunch of banh mi's and Thai tea. I was excited I bought my first sailor pin, a fine nib tuzu, but I was really satisfied with my finds that I had on the last day of Stationery Fest. We left Brooklyn and headed back to Manhattan, where we met up with our friends and had a bunch of really good dim sum and drinks. After dinner, we walked over to the bar next door and listened to some live music before winding down for the night. The last day in New York ended up being the prettiest day we had that weekend in the city. Bagels for breakfast before heading back to LaGuardia to catch our afternoon flight. We had a layover in Nashville around dinner time, and the Nashville airport was really unique because it had a lot of spots for live performers to showcase their talent. Overall, this was such a fun experience getting to see so much stationery and meeting so many stationery lovers. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one.